Hello, my name's Cliff Freilich. I'm the Executive Director of Cinema St. Louis, and we're the presenters of the 29th Annual Whitaker St. Louis International Film Festival. We're really pleased to be joined by a good portion of the filmmaking team for the documentary God Save the Wings. We are joined by the directors, Adam Knapp and Kenneth Linn, and two producers, Tim and Michael Romalis, and I think I just screwed up the pronunciation of his name, so he can correct it momentarily. And then we're going to also be joined by the person who's actually conducting the Q&A, and that is Andrew Wyatt. Andrew should be familiar with everybody who frequents Cinema St. Louis's website, because he is the editor and one of the lead critics for The Lens, our film blog. So I'm going to now exit, mute myself, and just watch and allow Andrew to carry.
All right. Thank you very much, Cliff, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Good to see everybody out tonight.
Hello.
Glad we have like the full creative team here, or the close to the full creative team. I guess the first question I have seen the film, just so you know. So I guess the first question I have is sort of the softball that I'm sure you guys get a lot is, what's the origin of this film? Whose brainchild is this initially?
Well, Tim, do you want me to start here?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, basically, the Wichita Wings, just to kind of as a little review, it was a professional indoor soccer team in a league called the Major Indoor Soccer League. And the MISL started in 1978, and the Wings joined in 1979. So you're seeing, we're over 40 years since since this all started. And the Wichita Wings became this phenomenon in Wichita. These international players came and played, and they really Wichita really took these guys, and just kind of treated them like family in a way. And my family, we started going in 1982, and throughout the 80s, it was just, that was my childhood effectively. And so fast forward decades later, as big as the whole Wichita Wings phenomenon was, if you didn't live here, you'd think you wouldn't even know that the Wings existed. So Tim and I, in the spring of 2016, we collaborated on a book called Make This Town Big, little plug here, and kind of outlined the story of the Wichita Wings. And we made a lot of contacts. We talked to players and coaches and former fans and media people. And we had success with it. But we knew that, wow, this would be a great story to tell on film. And so in a
let me pick up from there, Mike. So yeah. I was at the premiere of Adam's short film called Out Here in Kansas, and I saw
Where was
him
that at? What fest was that at?
That was actually a local premiere here in Wichita.
Okay.
And that film screened at a bunch of different festivals, but I saw it here in Wichita. And I went up to Adam at the end of the movie, and I said, "Hey, your next movie ought to be about the Wichita Wings." And it so happened Adam had been a reporter for the Wichita Eagle and had not covered the Wings, but lived in Wichita and been very aware of the Wings. And so, Adam, you can take it from here.
Yeah, well, I was a teenager in the 80s and went to many of those games. I was very much a Wings fan, and I was with him and Michael's book, and it really sparked my interest. I wanted to get Kenny on board. Kenny was not born until 1985, so this whole indoor soccer phenomenon kind of missed him, but we all had a meeting and decided we wanted to pursue it.
So were all of you guys who were old enough to have attended the games fans, or was this sort of like an introduction for any of you?
Mike was a super fan, as a kid. He attended far more games than any of the rest of us, and I was more of a casual fan. Just growing up as a kid in Wichita who played soccer, really almost any kid in Wichita, but especially ones that played soccer, I was a fan of the team. Would watch them on television, go to a game or two, and Adam was a fan. Our other producer Tori was not born during that era either, and so but Mike was really the biggest fan amongst the group of us.
And Mike had so much footage. He had so many DVDs of these games, and I don't want to speak for Kenny, but I think that's what really got him on board, was the massive amount of B-roll that was possible to us.
Yeah, I guess learning that it was a nonfiction book beforehand makes a lot of sense, because there's so much apparent exhaustive research in the film. It seems like you guys had a lot of wealth to draw from in Michael's book.
Well, Mike had basically every article written about the Wings from the Wichita Eagle and beyond. I mean, he had a extensive collection. He had painstakingly gotten from local libraries, and of course, literally 100 games at least. I think Mike, that's probably about right. And so probably the largest memorabilia collection in the world. And so he was sort of he could teach a master class in the Wichita Wings.
Yeah, I collected this stuff really just for my own enjoyment, the games, and I still had a lot of my media guides and programs and yearbooks, and I'd collected photos and things like that. But, all these years later, it turned out it was all very useful. And
well, that's how you become an expert in something, right? You get passionate.
Yeah, exactly.
Next thing you know, you're writing a book
that hadn't been seen in years, and so so really digging a lot of this stuff out. It was a lot of fun.
I tell people Mike has a PhD in Wings history, and I just have a bachelor's.
Right.
So yeah, and one of the things I really liked about the film was I got a sense for that. Basically, it seemed like every living person who may have been involved in the Wings in any capacity was tapped for an interview, segment at some point. I mean, the breadth of staff and people involved, even in the most ancillary ways that you guys got interviews from, is pretty impressive.
Well,
so I don't know if
intentionally
was that Michael's initial research that opened that, or did you guys have to do a lot of additional legwork for the film?
Well, the book opened the door to a lot of those people. Not all of them. There were a number of people in the film that were not interviewed in the book, and that was mostly thanks to Adam and Kenny for getting a hold of those additional people. But we had established relationships with a lot of these players and coaches and general managers and owners during the production or the writing of the book, and so it was just and we were able to get the key people on board, who then opened the Coach Roy Turner opened the doors to so many other people that we could talk to, and then Adam's connections in the world of journalism helped also open doors as well.
And that breadth, I think, pays off a lot in the film, in the sense that it feels like an omnibus work about the club as a whole, rather than a film about the players, or a film about fandom, or a film about the front office. Like it definitely feels like the sort of comprehensive film about the Wings experience and about their years.
Yeah, I mean, it took so many hands on deck to keep the Wings here for as long as they were. I mean, they were here for the franchise. The official franchise folded in 2001. And at that time, it was the longest serving professional soccer franchise in U.S. history. At 21 years, that doesn't seem like it's that long, but for the U.S., that was pretty good. And that's
so the franchise kept going even after MISL.
Yes, it played in a league called the National Professional Soccer League. For St. Louis fans, they might remember the St. Louis Ambush. That's what they played in. And so the Wings played from 92 to 2001. It wasn't the same experience by any stretch of the imagination, and that's why we focus primarily on the sort of the glory years, the golden years of the Wings.
And they were glory years because these were literally nationally televised games. You had NBA owners owning some of these MISL teams. You had attendance figures for the Wings higher than average figures for a number of NBA franchises. I mean, and league wide, you know, the Cleveland team was blowing the Cavaliers out of the water in terms of attendance in the 80s. And so this was a league on the sort of the cusp of something of becoming that, you know, fourth biggest league in the country at the time. Of course, it didn't happen, but they were on the cusp of it, and they came very close.
Well, tell me a little bit more. So on the one level, I think it's a good sort of omnibus doc that gives you a great historical overview and kind of puts the amount of like vintage TV footage that you guys include adds to sort of the feeling of immersion in that time, in that sort of soccer fever era. But I also, one of the reasons I ended up recommending the film was also this sort of Metadock angle that you guys add to it. With Andy Chapman's involvement, it takes on this additional layer. And, you know, I love docs. I've been involved in the doc evaluation procedure or process for SLIF for a couple of years now. And that's the kind of thing that just usually gets its hooks into me whenever it's more than just a progression of facts and impressions, when you could do something interesting with it in terms of storytelling. So could you guys, did that come from Adam and Ken, or what was the origin of that slightly a little bit more outside the box approach to it?
Yeah, I'm going to pass that one on to our resident filmmaker, Kenny, because a lot of that was, you know, a lot of his magic there, a lot of his ideas.
I think from that first opening scene with Andy, we just learned that, you know, he's not an actor. He's a professional athlete. He's a businessman. And the just interactions we were having were hilarious. There's this moment when he leans into the camera and he says the 80s were the greatest decade in existence. And immediately after, he would shoot knives at Adam and I, like, you know, was that one good enough? Was that one good enough? And it, you know, we got the take we wanted, but I mean, just watching those bloopers were hilarious. I mean, he was really ready for the night to be over. And, you know, we just kind of ran with that idea of him talking to the camera and thought, you know, okay, we actually brought him into town the following year, and we had all these scenes written, and we, you know, so that Andy narration stuff is just like kind of a little adventure that he's having through Wichita, riding around in his limo, getting fitted for the suit, and, you know, getting his shave and whatnot.
You can write a script for Andy.
We wrote those moments to help carry our film, help carry our narrative.
Well, I mean, I think it works. Yeah.
Yeah, you can write a script for Andy to follow, but as we learned, he's going to take it where he thinks it needs to go. And luckily, he has really good instincts because it turned out great. But I just remember the interviews looking at Adam and he's not saying the lines.
Well, I mean, he's charismatic, and that helps a lot.
Yes,
he's not a great actor.
He was a performer to the end.
He's a performer, but there's just something about it that I think definitely adds something. I think you know, if you described it on paper that we have this doc about you know, an indoor soccer league for an indoor soccer team from the 1970s and 80s, and oh yeah, we're going to also add this layer where our narrator through it, our guide through it, is going to be this guy who was once on the team, but we're filming him in modern day, and it's in black and white, and he's also we're also recreating some scenes, but he's, as he is now, we're not hiring an actor. We're going to make him recreate scenes from the 1970s. If you describe that on paper to somebody, I think they'd say, well, do we really need all this? Why can't we just tell the story of the team? But for me, it absolutely worked. Like, something about it put me in the right frame of mind. It added this additional layer of commentary to it. There's a lot of scenes where he's sort of like doing the fish out of water in the Midwest thing, and at the same time the film seems to be kind of taking the piss out of the Midwest in some instances. I just really enjoyed it, speaking as a native Midwesterner.
Right.
Well, I had originally written a kind of a quasi script which I lifted straight from the book about Andy in Wichita in New Year's Eve 1979 going on 80. And it was very serious. It was very noir, and Kenny kind of molded over for a couple days, and he's I think we realized this this is a movie about indoor soccer. We can't play it straight. And if we're going to have Andy, 59-year-old Andy play 19-year-old Andy, we can't, we can't pull that out. We've got to acknowledge that, yes, this isn't real. And it's kind of a wink and a nod to the camera, I think, and we continued it through the movie.
And every time there would be a scene that we had shot where there was, that kind of wink and a nod and humor, I would say to Adam and Kenny, like, we need to do more of this because, and I think we all eventually figured out, Adam and Kenny figured out before we did, but we all eventually figured out this is how you approach this subject. You just can't, you can't do it straight. I mean, yeah, there's straight portions, but you really have to have that wink and a nod, like Adam said.
Yeah, and I think it distinguishes the film from anything you could see on, a TV ESPN doc, I think, and in the best possible way. It reminds me of something like in the best way, the flourishes in it that are a little bit more meta reminded me of like American Splendor or Howard Stern's Private Parts, like the acknowledgement that we're kind of walking you through the fakery here, and it adds that layer of humor, like you said, that kind of acknowledges the absurd elements. But at the same time, I really appreciate it. And I'm not a sports guy, so I think one of the things one of the higher praises I can give the film is that not being a sports guy, it very much sucked me in.
Right.
And I've seen some people describe it, I don't know if this is your press or I've heard it elsewhere, but describe it as an underdog story. But in some ways, I don't think of it as it doesn't necessarily follow the sort of underdog Cinderella story template the way that we're used to. It's very much about a team that was beloved from the moment they arrived and had a lot of success. So do you guys want to talk about a little bit about sort of once we get, aside from Andy's sort of parts that weave in and out, the actual story of the team over its like I say, its biggest years. How do you guys craft a narrative around that? Like, how do you build that story a little bit?
It's not easy to build a story around a team that never won the big game. And
Right.
But Adam and Kenny kind of figured out that, and I'll let them talk more about this, that St. Louis Steamers, that rivalry in a particular game really was a lot of the story in a sense. And you guys can pick it up from there.
Go ahead, Kenny.
Oh boy. So building the narrative, I think we conducted something like 30 plus interviews, and we just started digging through the interviews and taking notes. We knew there were certain subjects that we wanted to dig into. We wanted to talk about the Angels, for example. We wanted a scene centered around the cheerleaders. We wanted a scene centered around the failure of the league, and so it's just finding these little clips of people that are talking about that, and then shaping scenes around those statements, and really, I mean, the film kind of builds itself from there. The Andy narration, for example, just helped us like kind of connect these pieces together that help us transition from subject to subject. I mean, to me, like, indoor soccer is I'm not a sports guy either, so I was definitely coming at this with an approach like I want this story to work for anyone, not just someone who lived through it. But I was born in '85, so I missed the golden years of the Wings. So I wanted to make that story accessible to anyone, whether they lived through it or were born 20 years after. But yeah, I think as for the idea of it being an underdog team, as Tim mentioned, that they never won the big one, and I don't think it matters. I mean, we're just so used to that underdog story where the Mighty Ducks get their jerseys and then they can go out and actually play as a team and win the big. Like, we're so conditioned to that as Americans. I just didn't find it that interesting, and actually, like, the the tragic loss at the end, I think, makes it more endearing.
Right. I mean, it's the Rocky angle more than the
Right.
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah.
Now, but you mentioned the Steamers rivalry, and one of the reasons that I recommended the film, obviously, is that there is that local connection. And I'm old enough that I do remember, like, I wasn't a huge fan of them, but I do remember going to Steamers games at the old St. Louis Arena, what was then called the Checker Dome.
Right.
So for me, I actually loved, it wasn't just pure nostalgia stoking. I do think it works within the context of the film, but me personally, I did like seeing the way that you sort of build to that one particular semifinal. I believe it was in March of 1981, that kind of functions as the climax for the film. How soon did you guys know that like that was going to be the tipping point? I mean, you basically get like a sort of almost like a play-by-play of that game as the final sort of quarter of the film. How did you know? Did you know early on that that was going to be sort of the big nugget at the end?
No, not at all. That was all Kenny. Right, Kenny?
I don't know if I want that crown to bear.
Well, how did that happen? How did it evolve that became sort of that you guys latched onto that and said this is our end, this is our climax,
Well, I think
our sports climax.
I'll start out. The St. Louis Steamers were such willing villains. Particularly Steve Petcher and his coach Pat McBride. They were super gracious to us when we visited St. Louis. We were turned down by a certain St. Louis steamer, Don Ebert, who did not want anything to do with the film at all. But that helped. That helped having those great villains, and Petcher. Petcher was cocky, and he was more than glad to talk about the '81 game, and it's exactly what we needed. So God bless Steve Petcher.
I think one thing that really stuck out to me about that particular game is we had interviewed everyone about it, and this was just such a painful moment in these guys' careers that they hadn't even gone and revisited that game in the 20 or 30 years that had passed.
And they didn't want to.
Yeah, and their memories were fuzzy about it. And so when we went back and watched it ourselves, we're like, wait a second, like this isn't what happened, at all. Like they got the big details right, Dowler injury, using the huge lead, but it just wasn't exactly the way they had remembered it. And I guess I found interest in that. Not really, I wasn't really interested in like shaming anyone about, oh, well, they got it wrong. So we ended up not using a lot of those interview segments. But, I found that Brad Higgs angle like incredibly tragic. He got a lot of flack. He carried a big weight, and one of the last things he said to us as before he left was like, thank you for bringing me into town and sharing that game with me. And he said that his last memory of Wichita before it had been that loss, and it had always been a heavy weight on him. And so like if all we did at the end of the film was give him a little bit of grace, then I'm happy with that.
Well, I'm glad that we do have that local connection to the Steamers, though, because I think that's going to help the film play better, and I think it's going to help with promotion of it. Again, just sort of having my memories of the Steamers, it's interesting as a St. Louisan to sort of view this through the looking glass, through the other side. And I actually really liked seeing the Steamers play the part of like the thuggish American heavies to like the more elegant European style that the Wings were known for. It's kind of cool to see it from that angle. So I'm hoping I'm hoping a lot of other St. Louisans and film goers here are interested in the same way.
Yeah, I mean the St. Louis rivalry, I think in so many ways really helped, I think, the franchise. That 81 game happened. It was only in the second year of the Wings' existence. And so I think that really helped with that rivalry, because certainly by the third season, the Wings thing just really exploded in Wichita. And that rivalry, I mean, I put it up probably against any rivalry you can think of at that time, because it really was based on bad blood. And
yeah, well, you need a hateable enemy.
Absolutely,
in pro sports in order for things to work. Good fandoms require a rival.
It
well,
was
Bill,
a re-
Bill,
it was a
Bill Cantling said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
it was a red hot rivalry, and if we had been screening in person in St. Louis, I fully expect we would get boos from.
So maybe the virtual is good.
Yes.
Yeah, because there was a lot of hate. I mean, in the newspapers, back and forth, and then at the games, batteries being thrown from the crowd, and like literally people fighting the players, as you saw.
Well, I would hope that maybe tempers have cooled in 40 years. You wouldn't have any old timers. Folks my age or older standing up and directing hate at you. Again, frankly, like the appeal for me is just seeing like that old scratchy game footage and seeing the faces and the personalities and the names that I haven't haven't been provoked into my memories in a long time.
Right.
Another reason I think the film works so well is because it's about a small to medium market team in a city that didn't have any other pro sports at all. If you're making this about the MISL team from a huge market that has 3 to 4 pro sports teams to this day, it doesn't have the same impact as my mind. And I don't know if this is a question for Michael or who, but like, what do you think it is about? Was it simply that Wichita didn't have a sport pro team and wanted a little taste of that glory? But what was it that created that kind of like fanaticism and almost instant sensation for the franchise when it first debuted?
Yeah, I think it was part of that. I mean, aside from Wichita State basketball, which the Wings never really had a lot of competition, in the fall and winter for sports. And so it was really the only game in town. And I think there was a certain pride about Wichita we were the smallest market. At that time, Wichita only had a population metro about 350,000. We had the smallest budget. We had the smallest arena, just a shade under 10,000. But I think there was a pride that, we can compete in this league with New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and St. Louis and Dallas and so forth. And we did. And I think that was also one of the reasons, Wichita survived to the end of the MISL, unlike a number of these, major markets. St. Louis, the original Steamers didn't even make it to the end of the MISL years in 1992. Mm-hmm. So we had great media coverage. The players, they marketed the team very, very well, got the players out into the community. And so, like I say, I think they really became Wichita's adopted sons, these guys from all these far-flung lands. And
it was so much at stake for Wichita because, this is, all of a sudden Wichita's competing on this national stage against markets that you don't hear Wichita's name next to New York and LA ever. And, it's just not going to happen. And so, these players were true stars. Many of them were beloved to this day by people in Wichita, because of the impact they had. It was a big deal for Wichita, in the same way that the Green Bay Packers are a big deal for the people in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the marketing, because one of the charms of the film is seeing all the those vintage ads. The marketing team brought those players in to endorse every local business imaginable. Oh, yeah. So all those vintage TV ads, it just adds to the charm of the film, I think.
Oh, sure. Oh, we would watch. I mean, I had watched a lot of those games way back when I got them, but watching them again, I'd forgotten so much of what was in there. And, we found so many gems that was like, yes, that's perfect. That works. That's wow. That made our night, so.
Yeah, I don't think a doc can usually fly entirely on pure nostalgia, but it's an important element of what makes this film a winner, in my opinion, is that 80s retro charm. And it isn't it isn't mean spirited at all. It's very much watching again, a pro sports team full of international players sort of be embraced wholeheartedly by this community. But you guys managed to pull together a wealth of footage. Not only the local TV ads and the game footage, you got the tryout footage for the cheerleaders. There's just an embarrassment of riches, considering, again, small market team from a defunct indoor soccer league. There's really, you guys cobbled together a real embarrassment of riches in terms of footage.
Well, like I say, I was hoping, one day it could be used for something like this, aside from my own enjoyment and collection. But I'd made a lot of contacts over the years, and so some of the local TV stations here, they gave us some stuff too that I'd never even seen. So we pulled so much out, and it was just really thrilling to be able to finally show a lot of this stuff that hadn't been seen in decades. So.
And God bless them. Most of the players who were involved in this organization are, not only alive but healthy, and were very willing participants. Some of them we had trouble tracking down, but we got who we wanted.
Yeah, like I said, there's just a ton of people interviewed, so it definitely feels like a comprehensive doc in that respect. Not to say that you couldn't spend another 2 hours on it if you had to, but it really does feel like you guys gave it the kind of like depth and breadth treatment that really gave, again, somebody who isn't familiar with the club, somebody who isn't deeply familiar with MISL. I walked away from it feeling not only educated about the history of the team and the history of the franchise, but also just sort of sucked in and charmed by the whole thing. So,
and in order to give these interviews, we had to travel to, we traveled to Copenhagen, Denmark, and we traveled to England and Wales, and a number of places inside the United States. We had to do that to get a lot of these interviews, and because there was so much support for the Wings here locally, that really helped us raise the money to do those things. And so, as everybody who's involved with documentary films knows, it's hard to get the money to make it happen. We were blessed to have a fan base that was, wanted this movie to happen, that helped us get there.
So there's a lot of local assistance with your financing there?
Yeah, I mean, we financed pretty much the whole film through fans, and some through other contacts we had, but it was financed mostly by Wings fans who wanted to see it happen, and we were able to raise quite a bit of money, and to do it the right way, with the right equipment, and with to make it the quality product that you just saw on the screen.
Yeah, I think it looks good. It's a again, you can easily imagine a huge franchise, pro sports franchise wouldn't even need to stretch to spend boatloads of cash to profile, but the fact that you're able to make it look as good as it does, it looks very slick, it looks very pro, but about, again, a defunct indoor soccer league, a team that from a small market, it speaks to the devotion that the team seems to instill, that people dug deep for it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's symbolic of this film. It was kind of symbolic, of the original franchise. Sorry, I've got a cat here. His friend, he wants to get his screen time. No, it's putting this together. I mean, I may have said it was a lot like keeping the Wings here. It just took so much support to keep the original franchise here, because every year, I mean, as we talked about in the film, there was a Save the Wings campaign. They had to, we had to raise money, sell tickets to keep the team here. And that spirit, it was kind of the same thing with making this movie. Yeah. It was kind of the same thing with making this movie, because it took, all hands on deck. So
yeah, that was probably one of the most revelatory moments for me in the whole film was seeing how there was this sort of community organized effort almost on an annual basis to keep the franchise alive with a real kind of like I've got one here somewhere too. With a real sort of like high school bake sale like spirit in terms of the community's approach to keeping the franchise afloat, which is really, again, I did not expect to see that. It's very fascinating to watch it unfold.
It kind of became a running joke in Wichita over the years, you know, here we go having to save the Wings again. But hey, people came through. I think people, look, we knew that Wichita was better with the Wings than without. And as the former GM, Bill Kentling said, I think he said it more in the book, but Wichita, the Wings, it was kind of a local cultural institution, not unlike the symphony or a ballet. Those things aren't typically expected to make money. It takes a lot of support. Having said that, you know, a lot of teams, maybe every team in the MISL never really made money. There was just a lot of, that's why so many franchises came and went. And so the fact that we could keep it going as long as it did, you know, it really does say something about this, the people in this city and what it meant at that time.
All right, I'm seeing that we've been going for about 40 minutes here, so I'm gonna wrap it up.
Okay.
I appreciate all you guys coming out to talk about the film. I hope it does well. I think in the St. Louis market in particular, it's gonna be really interested to see it, and I'm definitely recommending it to folks. So congratulations, and I hope it does well.
And Andrew,
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We going to bat for us. You know, that's amazing, and we just can't thank you enough too. So.
Oh, no
I'm so
problem.
glad you liked it.
Like I said, I watch a lot of docs every year for this, and I knew it was special right away. I knew there was going to be an audience for it here. So,
Right.
thanks again,
Thank you very
guys.
much.